Well, welcome, folks, and thank you for joining today. I'm going to start just by sharing one thing that I told Tim I was going to share. This was in the AJC Sunday. Congregations build homes to help. It's not just us, and this actually mentions Tim's organization, Enterprise. But the thing that the new concept that I was introduced to, many of you have heard NIMBY, not in my backyard, as opposition to what we address, what we call workforce housing. And then there's an organization started on the West Coast called YIMBY, yes, in my backyard. This article mentions YIGBY, yes, in God's backyard. And I kind of like that. I thought it was a good way to connect with congregations right away. So with that, let me introduce Tim. Tim Block is with Enterprise Community Partners. He leads their faith-based workforce development and has been with several foundations and organizations, including Home Depot. Some of us have heard of them, and Habitat. So he's got a lot of local knowledge. And Tim, I'll just take it away.
All right. Thank you so much, Jack, for the invitation. Hello, all. Good afternoon. I am going to share my screen because I have some slides. Okay, so again, thank you for the opportunity to be with you this afternoon. Like Jack said, my name is Tim Block. I am a director in our Southeast market of Enterprise Community Partners. The Southeast market office covers both the Carolinas, Tennessee, Alabama, and Florida. And I think there's 6 states, so I might be missing one. But our focus is to run programs through our market office. We have 11 market offices across the country. But before I jump into that, let me try to advance my slides and move this out the way. So I don't know if all of you are familiar with Enterprise, but the required commercial. So Enterprise is a national affordable housing intermediary, meaning we bring resources to bear around the affordable housing crisis. So what we specifically do is we help to assemble and deploy capital in communities to support the creation of affordable housing. We also advocate for policies both on the federal, state, and local levels to help support community development activities. And each of our 11 market offices have a local, state, and policy director embedded within the organizations to look at local policies that they can try to push and support in their communities. We also provide support to community development organizations through trainings, direct consultation, tools, impact measurement, and cross-sector relationships, public, private, philanthropic. There's 3 specific pillars that we're trying to touch based on our last strategic plan. Those are advancing racial equity and upward mobility, increasing housing supply, and building resilience and well-being. So Enterprise, back 40 years ago, really got it started through a faith-based encounter, and hence why we feel that our faith-based development initiative is very important to all the work that we do. So my colleague David Bowers, who oversees our Mid-Atlantic market office and is also the strategic person behind our FPDI, he often tells the story of how Jim Ross, who was a prominent real estate developer in the Mid-Atlantic, was approached by 3 women in his church about 2 dilapidated properties that they really wanted to do something about to address because they were in deplorable conditions. So he did just what all good developers do. He crunched the numbers and he said, hey, this doesn't pencil out. There's nothing we can do. And they said, okay, wait. So they went back, they show what 3 determined women of God can do. They actually raised the money to purchase the 2 properties, and then they came back to Mr. Ross and said, now what are you willing to do? And from there, he got fully engaged and actually started a planned community in Columbia, Maryland, but then also was the genesis for Enterprise Community Partners. So we really have our roots in the faith community, hence what drives a lot of the work that we're doing in that program. So why should we be even looking at the opportunity to work with faith-based organizations? There has been a lot of recent research and studies done to show just how significantly amount of land houses of worship actually own. There was a study done in the DC area from the Urban Institute that looked at 80 vacant parcels with the ability, based on the data, to actually accommodate 43,000 new units. And that's just one specific region. Here in Fulton County, we did our own data analysis, and there are over 3,200 parcels that equates to about almost 300 acres of land that can be developed for affordable housing as well. And similarly across the country, more and more people are doing the research to see what opportunities avail itself because of the land that houses of worship control. Couple that with the fact that a lot of houses of worship, and that article may even spoke to this, I didn't read that particular article, but a lot of houses of worship are struggling with the ability to bring their parishioners, their congregants back into the church, and are struggling with choices of what to do with the property. Do they sell it, close it, shrink it? So there is a lot of opportunity to work with houses of worship to help them be a part of the affordable housing crisis solution. And this just touches on that a little bit more. In order for us to have any kind of significant impact, we really need to look at different ways of approaching the affordable housing crisis and looking at innovative models. I touched just a minute ago on the opportunity that faith-based organizations have because of the land that they own. If they are able to use that land to bring to a affordable housing deal, that really significantly changes the course of how you look at financing that project, because the land is a valuable asset. If the land is brought to the deal, then you can look at other equity sources to fill the void for different other aspects of the development process, whether it's construction, pre-development activities. But what is lacking is houses of worship do not know how to tackle development. That's not their core mission. That's not what they do. A lot of times, if they are relying on people within their congregations to bring that expertise or that knowledge, a lot of them aren't, they might have a real estate background. They might, have developed a house here or there, but they don't have the depth and the knowledge to really train up a house of worship on how to do the development process. So hence is why we created our faith-based development initiative, is giving them the ability to be able to get that knowledge and that expertise that they need. Couple those two things together, like I said, it helps bring down the cost and allows more affordable housing to be developed. Again, David Bowers, who's on our team in our Mid-Atlantic office, is actually an ordained minister. And he says often that he learned a lot in divinity school, Old Testament, New Testament. He learned how to even give counsel and to people that were grieving over death. But what he didn't learn how to do was to read a performer. He didn't have a real estate class. So that's where we're meeting the houses of worship at, is where they are lacking that expertise. How can Enterprise help with that? So there's pretty much 5 components to our faith-based development initiative. I'll go through each of them in a little bit more detail in a second, but access to vetted partners, peer-to-peer learning, grants and capital, training, and then technical assistance and tool, all with the goal of helping to create affordable housing and community facilities. So with the trainings, we've developed a national curriculum that kind of walks houses of worship through the development process from start to finish. It's 13 sessions. It's very comprehensive. And what we're trying to do there, we're not trying to make them experts, because there's experts in the field that don't fully know everything that it takes to undertake development. What we're trying to do is to help them become comfortably conversant in the development process, so that if they are talking to a potential joint venture partner or a real estate attorney or an architect, that some of that language is not foreign to them. It doesn't create a barrier to them being confident with, having those conversations and moving forward with their project. In addition to that, in addition to the trainings, we have capital. We provide grants, both just straight out grants and then recoverable grants that they can use for market studies, feasibility analysis, and then additional pre-development activities. Again, what we're really trying to do when we work with the House of the Worship is to help them make an informed go or no-go decision on the development process. A lot of times, a House of Worship might have a thought, an ideal, a aspiration, but is that really embedded in reality until they actually get into the weeds and do something about it? So again, what we're trying to do is level the playing field, cut the learning curve down, and help them be able to make go or no-go decisions on whether or not it makes sense for them to try to undertake development. And then the TA is a part of doing that, is working with them through the national curriculum that we develop, but then we also assign them a development consultant that can work with them one-on-one individually about their specific project and things that they're trying to undertake. In addition to those three things, we also have peer learning. So we have this thing that we call iron sharpen iron. We bring senior clergy together and have them talk with amongst one another to kind of share best practices, pitfalls, successes, and just encourage one another. And then another component of our program is a lot of time House of the Worship don't know who to go to for advice, for expertise. We have a couple of things. So one, we have a vetted list of professionals that we're cultivating, so that when a House of Worship does have a need around an architect, a real estate attorney, we can provide them solution. Now, we don't tell them who to work with. We give them a couple of options. We encourage them to have conversations and kind of vet them for themselves and choose the person that they feel will work best with them. And then in addition to that, we have a bullpen that we're developing that is similar to that, but also is focused on vetted development consultants that can provide them that one-on-one TA. And then in addition to some of the resources that I mentioned, we have a HUD-funded program called Section 4, where we're able to make grants specifically to House of the Worship to help build their capacity, not so much to do a project, but their internal capacity to, have staffing and things of that nature, especially if they are looking at to not just do a one-off project, but creating a CDC or a community development corporation where they want to do more housing activities or community facilities activities. So what have we done so far? What have we accomplished? So right now we have over 7,500 units in our pipeline across Enterprise's footprint that we're working to help them, again, make that go, no-go decision. If it's go, then we're helping them with all the resources that I outlined so that they can successfully move their projects forward to closing and to construction and to managing it. And then we, since 2006, when we got started with the FDI program, we have helped to produce over 1,500 units and one health clinic. And I have an example of that in a second on the slide. But we've deployed over $3.5 million in grants. We have a CDFI, which is a part of Enterprise's family, Enterprise Community Loan Fund. So through that CDFI, we're able to make loans. We have a mortgage financing platform called Bellwether, and they help with some of the projects that we support as well. And then we also have an investment side where, if you're familiar with the low-income housing tax credit, we help syndicate that. That's the major mechanism for actually financing especially multifamily affordable housing units. So all of the houses of worship that we work with, if they're pursuing that type of project, have access to those types of resources. We've hosted over 160 trainings, and in the Mid-Atlantic, where we first got our start, they actually partnered with the University of Baltimore to conduct certificate programs for that FPDI curriculum program that they launched back then. And then we're continually to try to work with our internal resource development group to raise money so that we can do more cohort programs, provide more resources to help more houses of worship across the country. And then we're not just looking at the development of affordable housing, we're trying to couple that and pair that with policy wins. So specifically, what kind of policies can we champion, support, and advocate for that helps to bring resources to bear on the faith community. There's some specific examples in Seattle and Washington State where they've created some resources through policy to support houses of worship. So what I want to spend a few minutes on is just talking specifically about the program that I run out of our Southeast Market office. And this is similar to some of the work that we're doing in other markets as well. But we were fortunate enough to receive a rather large grant from the Wells Fargo Foundation to institute what we're calling these faith-based development technical assistance cohorts. I touched on some of this in my prior remarks, but what we're really trying to do there is we created a national curriculum that, again, walks houses of worship through the development process, from discernment to early pre-development, through managing the property, to all the elements of the development process. So over 13 90-minute sessions, we kind of walk them through that. And it's no cost to the house of worship to do this. In addition to the national curriculum that they go through, they also have access to dedicated financial resources to help them. So they have each up to $10,000 available to them to do market study and feasibility analysis. That's a pure grant. And then we're giving them also access to up to $40,000 in a recoverable. And we say recoverable. If the project doesn't go forward, we're not going to press, we're not going to send collection agencies or anything like that after anyone. But our hope is if the projects are successful and they can go forward because they use that money to do early renderings, zoning analysis, environmentals, that they can embed that into their project performance so that when the project does go to construction and completion, they can repay those funds back to Enterprise so that we can recycle them and help other houses of worship. I mentioned all the capital resources and products that Enterprise have available. Cohort participants have the ability to draw down on those. I mentioned before the one-on-one TA. Each of the participants in the cohort has access to up to 25 hours of dedicated development consultant assistance that Enterprise contracts with and pays directly on their behalf. And then again, the access to the vetted list or the bullpen of professionals that, as they're reaching particular milestones in the project, they have resources that they can reach out to and draw down from. And then I'll touch on this in a second, but we can't get everybody into the cohort program, so we've created an online resource as well, and I'll explain that in a second. So the way that it's structured, we have the cohort training piece, which is focused on the content. We have case studies that I'll show you a little bit of where we drew those case studies from, but completed projects that we've supported across the country where we can use that as an aid in helping them understand how you go about doing development. And then I mentioned the faith-based development guide, which is probably going to be released in the next 30 to 40 days, where houses of worship that aren't in the cohort program will have the ability to go onto a website, do an intake form, tell us a little bit about what the aspiration of what the project is, and then it kind of spits out a guide that they can follow. And I'll show you what that looks like in a second. But these are the 5 modules that we cover in that national curriculum that we developed You can see from the slide that it's very comprehensive as far as what we cover. And we've contracted with a trainer that kind of runs the program. He's split with a professor that's at Morgan State University. But we've had a lot of great feedback on how in-depth the trainings are and how much more House of Worship feel empowered after having gone through just our first iteration of doing the cohort program. This is a look at that lesson plan or that guide that I said, if your House of Worship that is not in the cohort program, but you want to figure out how you get started, this is an example. After you answer some questions, give us some information on your project, it kind of spits out this guide.
Left turn at the end of the road onto Long Ground Highway.
And then just to give you a flavor for the House of the Worship that we're working with in the Southeast, we're working with 16 House of the Worship in our Atlanta cohort. You can see they range from larger House of the Worship to some smaller houses of worship. We're also simultaneously running a program in South Florida. And right now we're working with 7 houses of the worship in South Florida to take them through the TA program. And just, quickly to give you a flavor for, things that we've learned over the years, working with houses of worship. One of the biggest thing is unfamiliarity with the development process oftentimes causes houses of worship to do nothing because they just don't know where to turn, how to get started. So they take no action. And we're hopeful that, providing these resources in this curriculum, lessens that barrier. They also have a need for extensive technical assistance. We touched on that a little bit. The connection to intellectual capital, both public sector, private sector, developer, legal, they have need all the way around for that type of expertise to help them make that go or no go decision. And then what we've learned also is most of the times, these houses of worship, they don't undertake a project by themselves. We show them and we teach them how to, submit a request for applications, how to vet a potential development partner. Then they actually co-develop, or they actually, work with a development partner on the project. But in any case, if that is the case, they need to make sure that they have their own attorney that's looking out for their best interest. So a lot of times they rely on, the developer's attorney, and then that person may or may not have their best interest. So we caution them against doing that. And then one of the biggest things we also notice is that there's a disconnect with the timelines that houses of worship have and developers have. So developers are looking at quarterly. They want to move fast. They want to get things done. Where houses of worship, they look at things in terms of eternity. And so we need to kind of bridge the gap and bring them together, slow the developers down and speed the house of worship and meet somewhere in the middle so that they can work effectively together. And then at times, mistrust and lack of appreciation on what a house of worship actually is bringing to the table, besides the land is taken advantage of or misunderstood. So again, we're trying to inform them and equip them with being able to be comfortably conversant in the development process so that they can have a better level of trust and actually garner a level of trust and appreciation because they know a little bit of what they're talking about. And clergy leaders need to make sure that they're casting a vision, gain buy-in from membership, and delegate the day-to-day management because they're busy running their house of worship. And if that's the case, they need to delegate authority, but not responsibility. They still need to be engaged and know what's going on in order to continue to move the project forward. These are some of the questions that we teach them through the curriculum, but even if we're not taking them through the curriculum. If they ask us for House of Worship asks us for advice, these are the things that we're telling them that they should consider from the onset. Do they have site control of the land to develop their vision? Do they want to maintain ownership or site control over the long term? Some do, some don't, but that should be, clearly articulated at the onset. They should, develop long-term and short-term economic goals if that's what they have. If they want to have cash flow coming in for the House of Worship, that should be stated, and they should figure out how they create a project that does that. If they just simply want to do it for mission and provide housing, then that's okay too. But they need to be clear up front exactly what it is that their economic goals are. And then, are they willing to contribute the land to the deal? Do they want to maintain ownership of it, or they just want to give it, as part of the transaction? Those things they need to consider. And then, of course, what type of housing? I know you guys are particularly concerned about workforce development housing, but what types of housing or community facilities do they want to develop? Who is their target market? What's the impact that they want to have in the long run? And I mentioned the economic empowerment interests, if they have racial equity goals that they want to embed, if they want to try to create jobs. There's a number of different things that can be incorporated into a project. They just need to be clear up front what it is that they want to do, and kind of narrow it too. They don't want to try to do everything because they'll have issues trying to get anything done if they approach it from that way. And again, a real estate attorney is really key. That is, advocating on behalf of the House of Worship. So, this takes a lot of prayer, a lot of consternation, but there is, verses in the Bible to look to draw from. The whole book of Nehemiah is centered around, casting a vision, laying out a plan, and mobilizing folks to come together to fulfill that. And you can see from some of the scriptures that are listed here what it says about land and what it says about development. So I just wanted to touch on that. So just real quick, and I'll leave time for plenty of questions. These are just some examples specifically from my Mid-Atlantic department on projects that have been created and the type of support that enterprise provided to those. And you can see as I go through these, they vary from, what it is that they were trying to accomplish. This first one is the Summit at St. Martin's. It was 178 units, 50% of those units was reserved for folks under 30% of AMI. They're serving formerly homeless individuals and families. And you can see the type of resources that Enterprise brought to bear. And this one opened back in 2010. It's another one, Plaza West. It was 50 2- and 3-bedroom units of affordable housing for grandparents raising their grandchildren and serving families making anywhere from 30 to 60% of AMI. Again, you can be, flexible and intentional about who it is that you're trying to support and trying to serve. And you can see here that they really wanted to, in their community, they saw a niche for grandparents, taking the place of parents and actually having to raise their grandchildren. So they didn't want them to be separated. So that's why they came up with this particular project. And then this one is Matthews Memorial Terrace, and it is 99 residential units. And there, I guess there was a former Berry Farm, like HUD housing there. So this project kind of replaced that, 32 senior units and 32 family units. The total development cost was $20.7 million, and this opened in 2012. And this one is one that is unique in that they layered a couple of different things. So they had a 32,000 square foot community facility they partnered with a local healthcare organization to rent that space out. Again, drawing resources back into the House of Worship through that rent. And then and they also, I think near adjacent to this, they have 47 units for low to moderate income seniors. So they have a healthcare facility, senior center, and then on the top floor of this particular one, they have a kind of like a banquet hall, again, that they can rent out to the community for meetings, parties, things of that nature. This is one that is called Trinity Plaza, 49 residential rental units targeted at residents making 50% AMI. And they also have ground floor retail and office space on site. They have a pharmacy and a daycare, and this opened in 2015. Another one, this was done with Arlington Presbyterian Church, 173 units, including 15 that are accessible. They have, again, commercial space on the ground floor and civic space. This opened in 2019. So you can see from these examples that they run the gamut as far as size of the projects, AMI that they're targeting, and providing resource and community space as well. So that's all the examples I have. I'll try to click on this and see if this video plays a 4-minute video, and then I'll leave the rest of the time, Jack, if that's okay, for any questions that the group might have. If I can get this to open. It may not open from now. Let me see.
I spend 20 minutes each day on it for 6 weeks.
Get this.
You won't believe my results.
You also want this success in your market, and you definitely want this delighted loyal customers. To do all of that, you need certain
All right, I apologize. Somehow I got a commercial going at the same time. It might be because I think I got 2 of them open. Let's see.
To work with houses of worship, we want to get new projects developed that bring new units online that help serve low and moderate income families. So the Macedonian really does represent that.
When we walked into this project, we did recognize immediately that you have to have expertise to get anything done well. What Enterprise Community Partners brings to the table is really the relationships and the expertise to help you to do it well.
The most essential element of any real estate development deal is the real estate. And so a number of houses of worship own land. Some own 2 or 3 lots. We have
Hey,
houses of
Jim,
worship.
we're just hearing the sound. We're just hearing the sound.
Okay,
It's not
I
new.
need to
Houses of
switch.
worship have been doing this for years.
I'm looking
What's
like-
unique, I think, about the Enterprise Faith-Based Development Initiative is being intentional and proactive about, 1, reaching out to the faith community, and 2,
That's
bringing
good.
together a range of products and services that will assist them.
I'm a teacher and I volunteer in the community a lot. When I lived an hour away, it was very difficult for me to tutor, to come and help kids, for the kids to come to me. Now the door is never closed. It's always somebody needs something, they're able to reach me. I'm able to reach the children in the community or anybody through the church that I also volunteer through. So it has enabled me to accomplish all that I've always wanted to accomplish. Being able to live here is really making a difference in the way our family works.
One of the things that's very unique about the Macedonian is the fact that it incorporates 1, the housing element, but 2, also the business incubator component. So it really does show a very interesting mix of how these projects can bring different components together to build up a community. The local government is thinking about, well, should we work with houses of worship? Yes, you should, because if they're bringing the land, it means probably there's going to be less subsidy that's needed from the public coffers. And for developers and financiers like us at Enterprise thinking about, well, should we? Absolutely, because you're working with folks who are mission aligned, who want to serve the people, who are going to stick with it. So these are typically organizations that aren't here today and gone tomorrow. They've been around 50 years, 100 years, 150 years in their community. So they're not going anywhere. And so working with that kind of mission aligned partner, and then leveraging the resources they bring with public dollars as well as with private resources means that it really is a win-win.
Enterprise, they brought the greatest value of all to this development, and that was the value of equity, money. And that we built this at a time when it was difficult to find anybody who would buy the equity, who would buy the tax credits, and Enterprise came forward and made the deal work.
it turned out to be a wonderful place to rent an apartment because it's just across the street from my church and it's just across the street from the place where I work. This is really working for us, for a one-income family especially.
Enterprise was founded because there were 3 women out of the Church of the Savior community who wanted to provide housing for low-income persons. And so they had that passion, had that vision. Well, that's what we're doing today, 30 years later, is bringing the passion and the faith and the commitment that grows out of the faith community to the table. So it really is a marriage. It's in our corporate DNA to be about service and to have that kind of faithful passion and commitment to the cause.
All right,
How to kill all mosquitoes in the area.
stop that. All right, so that is my last slide. Jack, I'll entertain any questions that anybody might have.
Thanks, Scott. And folks, if you want to just if you ask any questions, take it off mute. There's one that I want to start with. In your list of one of your slides had a list of questions or things to consider. And number 2, if I remember correctly, was do you want to live out your mission or do you want to raise revenue? And that's the way this idea was first introduced to me and several of us several years ago. Is that an either or can you do both?
I think you could do both. And I do want to also recognize that I have my colleague Shannon Ball, who helps support our faith-based development initiative, has joined us. So Shannon, if you want to chime in and help in any questions, feel free to do so. But Jack, absolutely. I don't think it's a either or. I think you can clearly lay out what your economic development goals are for the project, for the House of Worship. At the same time, align that very closely with a vision or mission to support a particular population. So there might be some trade-offs a little bit on how you could do both, but I definitely think you can incorporate both of those goals into your decision making.
Hey, I've got a question. My name is Aliza. I'm with United Way. Thanks, Jack, for bringing Timothy on, and great to meet you, Timothy. I'm glad to hear what you're doing. You're doing awesome. I'm wondering if in any of the communities you've worked, do you face issues with City Hall in terms of zoning? Those issues with the NIMBY type of issues. Do you face that? And if so, before you start the whole process, do you bring in city government first, or how do you go about managing that?
Yeah, absolutely, Elisa. Thank you so much. And everyone, please call me Tim. Yeah, definitely. There are some local municipalities that work better with the faith community than others. I think that's just a reality across the board, everywhere. But I will say that, again, part of what we're trying to teach our House of Worship is how to recognize that, for one, and then how to go about navigating that through building relationships, starting early, bringing in the right professionals that can give you advice on what particular you need to ask of a local government or local community to be able to get through zoning or overcome some of the obstacles in that particular project. So definitely, I think it's there. But I will say, as this whole movement to help to have houses of worship engaged in the development process, more and more cities are coming on board and trying to help and bring resources there. Right here in the city of Atlanta, the city of Atlanta has initiated its own faith-based development initiative, eerily similar to ours in name and everything, but they see the importance that the research and the data that I shared with you earlier, they're taking note of that as well, and they're trying to set up and have conversation internally within their in their organization and their government on how they can break down barriers revamp the zoning the department and make sure that they have a person even assigned to work with the faith community around development issues. So I think the more we show that this can be done, is successful, and can be done at scale, the more cities will come on board and try to bring resources to bear as well. Yeah. Did I answer your question, Elisa?
Yes, it's great, and I'm glad to hear you're here in Atlanta with us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Tim, this is Matt. I'm with St. Louis DePaul, and thank you for the presentation. Just a wonderful program that you guys are doing. Great work. The question I had is some of the projects you were showing were pretty big developments. And I was wondering, are many of the projects sort of a coalition of churches or faith, houses of worship, rather than individual churches taking on that risk themselves? Are many pooling their resources together to try to do this?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I think for the most part, everyone that I showed you in those case studies was, well, I take that back. I couch it a different way. So I think for the most part, most of those were individual houses of worship partnering with either a CDC or a development partner to do the project. However, the way that whole effort got started in the Mid-Atlantic was, and it was on the slide, I'm drawing a blank on the name, but I think it was the River Clergy of Mid-Atlantic or whatever. It was a collection of house of worship that came together to talk about the development process. And then from there, I think if they weren't doing projects together, Matt, what they were doing was convening each other so that they knew what opportunities were and helping each other. And Enterprise was using them as a way of getting the word out and drawing those houses of worship into our cohort program so that we could work with them. I will say Shannon and I are also working with a similar coalition in South Florida called the Collective Empowerment Group of South Florida. They're a collection of 53 houses of worship in the South that are looking at development, community development, but then also some economic development activities as well. And we're using that in a similar vein. We're pulling from those houses of worship to get them into our cohort program to help them with their development activities. And it also is helping us because we have that, I wouldn't say automatic, but there's already a relationship and trust built because we're working with the parent organization and they kind of help sign off on the resources that we have and stuff like that. So I don't know if that answered directly. I think more and more, again, as this continues to go to scale, I think more and more houses of worship will be looking to partner with one another to have greater impact and to defray some of those costs and the risk and some of the things that you said, Matt. And I think, going forward, we want to be more intentional, when I say we, Enterprise, about trying to work with denominations and larger bodies of houses of worship so that, again, we can have that greater impact and reach more houses of worship.
Thank you.
This is Kathy Swan. I'm actually on the NFIN team and retired executive director of Drake House. I just have to throw in, Tim, I was thrilled to see that you have Gilliam Place on your reference list. I'm very familiar with that property. It's 3 blocks from where my daughter and grandchildren live in Arlington. And that's a perfect example of having all the stars align, having the government receptive, having a nonprofit in place, their housing authority, and that Presbyterian church, which was there on that corner, they've completely redone into this beautiful housing property right on Columbia Pike. So kudos to your organization. I've watched it over the years get built, and it's beautiful.
Well, thank you, Kathy.
Mm-hmm.
Who else has questions?
Jack, if I may, Tim, great presentation. I had to step out for a second, so I'm glad it's recorded because I'd like to watch through it. But I've been very active in the nonprofit sector here in North Fulton for many years, and And right now with the American Commerce Bank, it's a community bank based out of Johns Creek, Georgia, Bremen, Carrollton, and Tallahassee. And as you're very well aware, no doubt, projects like this fit wonderfully within the banking industry's obligations under the Community Reinvestment Act. Yep. In a number of pillars within that. And can you give me an idea how perhaps you either have or envision engaging not just the largest banks, but some of the community banks, throughout the communities that you serve?
Absolutely. And thank you for what you're doing. And I will say, for the most part, we have attracted some of the larger banks. I mentioned the Wells grant. My wife works for Bank of America. They're very supportive of our faith-based work. Chase, all the big banks are in this for some of the reasons that you stated, CRA and others. But I think you're absolutely right. The smaller banks have resources, and I'll give you a perfect example. So Shannon and I have been working with that collective empowerment group of South Florida. They helped them do some development on their own. The Miami-Dade County donated some single family vacant lots to them to develop. They had a hard time, moving the needle, getting anything started. So we've been project managing them every 2 weeks for the last 3 years. And they finally actually had a ribbon cutting last week on the first home. And unbeknownst to me, when we were at the ribbon cutting, they had the bank there that provided the mortgage. They had the title company, but the bank impressed me because given what's going on right now, and this was a small, boutique bank, offered a 3.1 or 3.2, fixed rate mortgage to the low income homeowner, which I thought was incredible because of, where interest rates now are, whatever. Again, there's so much alignment with that type of activity from the bank and what we need in order to house, these population and that person, if she couldn't have got the 3.1 and she had been waiting on the house for those 3 years, she wouldn't have been able to get into that house. So it's critically important that we try to find ways to have better dialogue with those smaller banks to let them know about the opportunity and let them know that, you don't have to bring millions of dollars to bear, but if you can help with mortgages, if you can help with whatever, there's a role for you to play in the ecosystem.
That's great. There are many things that can be done, whether it's financial literacy or it's a participation. A lot of times these are sold as participations to banks across the country as well, and even local banks with interest. So,
and I will say that we're undertaking a 5-year business plan for our Southeast FBDI program, and that's one of the things that we want to look at is greater partnerships and expanding and not leaving any stone unturned and looking at how small banks, CDFIs, how they can help play a part in greater success for our program.
That's awesome. Thanks.
Are there other questions? I'm gonna since we have some time left and I've got the controls, I'm going to give a bit of a pep talk. Some of you have been on this group since 2013. We're celebrating our 10th year of doing this. I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm getting a little tired. We've got to get moving. We've been talking about this for a long, long time and wishing that other people would solve our problem. And this is an organization that's come to us and said, we've got more solutions than you know, and we're here to help you. And I think it's going to take some sales and assertiveness on our part. We're going to be keeping the theme of faith-based housing. We're going to have to be evangelists on this and not get intimidated. We have faith-based housing in Roswell at St. Peter Chanel Church, where there's housing for seniors. There are examples of this around the area, not just in Atlanta. So I think it's going to take each of us going into our pastors or rabbis or imams or whoever to say, let's start talking about this. I talked to our business manager on inviting him to this, and he couldn't make it. But when I first said it to him, he said, "Oh yeah, we could sell off the back lot, and we could put luxury homes there, and we could really make some money." He's a guy that used to work with UPS. I said, or we could put workforce housing there, because how's UPS doing recruiting employees? And if you put more luxury housing behind the church, how's that going to solve UPS's problem? And he had never thought of it that way. So there's 22 people on this call. Barbara, Matt, and I all go to the same church, so that knocks it down to less than 22. But I hope that you all will think about this, talk about it, and Tim and Shannon are available to chat with you and with your pastors. We'll be talking about it more in NFIN. So we do hope that you will. We do hope something comes out of this. Anything else before we go?
I just wanted to share my contact information on this slide here. If anybody wants to take a screenshot of it, that's my direct office line that will ring to my office, home office, office, and my email address is here as well.
Tim, will you be able to share these slides?
Yeah, absolutely. I was already thinking of that, so I have a version with my notes and without my notes. I'll share the version without my notes over to you.
Okay, that's great. And then I'll send it out to everyone that was on the call.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciated the opportunity. And if there's a need for us to come speak to your individual house of worship, definitely open to doing that as well. So just let us know.
Great. Anyone else have any questions before we leave? Any comments? All right. Well, thank you all for giving us your afternoon, and good luck.
Thanks, everyone. Be safe.
Thank you all. Thank you, Tim.
Bye-bye. Be safe. Be blessed.